Brandon Sanderson likes the show. I don't know why everyone seems to think he doesn't like it. He said so much to the contrary it's crazy. And yes, he's allowed to say whatever he feels about the show. You'll see. Now, I know some people might say that he still can't say anything bad because he wants his books adapted, but that still doesn't track with me. Because this is still just Amazon we're talking about here, not Hollywood proper. But even if that were the case, he could have just stayed quiet. You don't have to sing Amazon's praises if he didn't like it. If he really disliked it, he could have just not said anything. But vague stuff like, oh, I hope it does well, hope they do a good job. Whatever that kind of BS is. He could have did that. And you want a great example of what he could have done? And that's just look what Mark Hamill did when he was doing The Last Jedi. And he was doing like press tours for all that. And you had better believe Mark Hamill had like a million contracts telling him he wasn't allowed to say anything bad about Disney or the movie. Like 100% legally, Mark Hamill could not say a darn thing with that binding contract. But he still said stuff like he fundamentally disagreed with Rian Johnson's view on Luke Skywalker. He said that like multiple times. When people asked him how The Last Jedi was different, he was like, well, it's longer. He said stuff like that. You can definitely tell he did not like the movie, but he was not allowed to say so.
We get to see Luke back in action?
Well, certainly back in a role that affects the overall storyline.
I hope people are happy. It seems like, because in Hollywood, remember, kids, it's not important if it's of high quality, only if it makes money.
Is there anything that you want us to know going into The Last Jedi? Anything you want to tell the audience or the world about this one in comparison to the other ones?
It's the longest one. I said to Ryan, Jedis don't give up. I mean, even if he had a problem, he would maybe take a year to try and regroup. But if he made a mistake, he would try and right that wrong. So right there, we had a fundamental difference. But it's not my story anymore. It's somebody else's story. And Ryan needed me to be a certain way to make the ending effective. I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well. But listen, I still haven't accepted it completely. But
that Luke ends up in this film that you thought it would all these years later?
No.
What I want to know is, how is it for you, how is it different than any of the other movies?
It's longer.
I said to him, I said, Ryan, Jedis don't give up. I got to stop thinking old school because this is the new generation. In this generation, not only they give up, but they move to an island for 20 years.
But then you look at all the stuff, the few things that Brandon Sanderson has to say about the Amazon Wheel of Time show, which is canceled, by the way. Woo! I love to hear that, man. I knew it was going to get canceled eventually. I don't know how they were stupid enough to greenlight 3 seasons of it, though. But yeah, Sanderson could have said all kinds of stuff. He could have said, well, it's, there's only 8 episodes. That's, could have been more episodes, or, well, it's, I don't know how they're going to fit the whole book in one season. He could have said stuff vague like that if he was, like, hated it. But he doesn't. He's allowed to say whatever he wants, and he's like, well, I love it. He's great. Rafe is great. Rafe is over here rafing the show. And Sanderson's like, it's great. He's terrific. He's doing a great job. And he says that all the way to season 3. In fact, you see his final quote about this, which isn't even on a Wheel of Time video. And he's like, yeah, season 3 was the best season. That's him. That's his words. He's saying that season 3 was the best. Wow. I mean, if you ask me, season 1 was at least the closest to the books, even if they were deviating like by 500 miles. But he wants to say season 3 was the best season? I don't know what the hell he was smoking, but it must be pretty good stuff. But anyway, here I'm going to compile a bunch of clips here so that you can see directly from him saying how much he likes the show.
I know that you've spoken a lot about, you know, that you've read some of these early scripts and that
Yep, I've read the first 6. I still haven't seen 7 or 8, but I've read the first
okay,
6.
of the first season. Yep. And I know that you've had a chance to talk to Rafe. So clearly,
Like, as I've said to people, I envision this as a new turning of the wheel. It's, you know, it's the same souls, but in a different actual turning of the wheel. It's not, you know, the one that Jim and I worked on. It's a different version of it. And so some of the same events are happening. Others are different and being rearranged. And so what worked for me and what anyone has to do who's in this situation is read through the books, feel the books, like, you know, and then try to have that in mind when you're working on it, right? Like, anytime I started to get lost, I just went back to the books and read what Jim had written, and it pulled me back in. When I was working on, and I reread Eye of the World when I was working on the deleted scene we talked about, it threatened to do that to me again. I was pulled in. I'm like, ooh, this and that, and you know, the books are just so descriptive, with lush use of language in a way that's never feels like it bogs down. That you just have to go to the books. Go to the books. He won't do it the way I did it, and that's all right. As long as he's going to the books and he's like feeling the soul of those books. Is that too metaphysical, too bird by bird, as I sometimes say? I am a consulting producer. My involvement in the Wheel of Time is centered around 2 things. First off, I read all the scripts and I give feedback directly to the showrunner. Okay. Who his name is Rafe, and he is amazing. Really great writer. He was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a long time. I try to prepare him for what the Wheel of Time fandom will say, book fandom, about certain things he's doing in the movies.
That's got to be a super important role, because I would assume that a TV writer is not prepared for that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Rafe is
fandom.
actually pretty decent. There's things that he's not quite aware of, but I mean, he picked this up because he was a fan of the books.
Yeah, that's true.
Legit fan of the books, so he knows a little bit about book culture. My job is to be able to say, look, he's involved, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a really important
You're the
thing.
figurehead.
Yeah. But interestingly, my contract does not have non-disparagement. I am allowed to say whatever I want about the show in any way.
That is interesting.
I generally like to respect what people are doing, and I happen to really like what they're doing with the Wheel of Time. But I am allowed to say I hate it if I do.
If you do.
In fact, I warned Rafe ahead of time. I'm like, if you bring me on, this is one of the things. I will need to be able to tell it straight to the Wheel of Time fans. And he said, I'm okay with that.
While yes, they are definitely tipping their hats to hardcore fans, they have to appeal to people who have never read the books before, or the show will die.
Yeah, you can't survive only on a books fandom for most shows. There are some rare exceptions.
I think you have to appeal to the non-fans, but ideally you're going to have the fans as well.
Yes.
And my big worry with any adaptation, and I'm very worried about this with Wheel of Time as well, is that the hardcore fans are going to whine so much about the things that have been changed and about the imperfections that they're going to scuttle their one best chance to ever get an adaptation.
Yeah. I got the first scripts. If you guys have not watched Wheel of Time, I would recommend you go watch them. I think they are very good, the episodes. So in the books, Matt doesn't get a personality till book 3, really book 4.
Really?
I'm joking, but...
no.
So here's the thing. I think all of the characters in soul and personality are very true to the books. On, and I actually warned Rafe about this. I'm like, come on, you don't have to do this to Abel Coffin, do you? He is the delight. So he kills his wife. It replaces a scene later in the first book where he kills some White Cloaks with a bit of berserker rage.
Okay.
And It's a very controversial
which is
change.
what you were talking about with trying to capture the spirit of it.
Yeah, there are a lot of things I suggested, and I'm shocked they actually did. This is my the most surreal part about all this is that I made a bunch of suggestions and Rafe listened to me. Because I read the first 2 episodes and I sat there for a while and I had to shift my view from this is going to be a 1-to-1 adaptation to this is more like The Shining. I didn't go that far. I think it is more like the Lord of the Rings adaptations. I think Peter Jackson maybe was a smidge on this side more. I'm gesturing toward the side of the straight up adaptation versus the soul of it, but he's in the middle. He's like right down the center. And I think Wheel of Time is more like that than it is like
it's more of a recreation than it is a reimagining.
Well, I think it's on the reimagining side, but it's really close to Lord of the Rings. And not really close to The Shining. If you imagine 50-50 between these two, it's close to the 50-50 line, just over the line into reimagining. But the same story happens with the same souls.
So as this thing is endlessly cycling around, this isn't a retelling of the books you read. This is a retelling of one of the other cycles that is the same story as the books you read.
That is my headcanon, because the books have this built-in mechanism, and that frees me and liberates me to just let you make the show you want to make, and I'm going to try to help you make the best version of it. Even on things like I didn't like Perrin's wife being killed. I understood why he put that scene there. I think it's actually a good scene. I think Perrin berserking during the Trolloc attack and killing somebody on accident or wounding someone is a really important scene, particularly if you're going to cut the White Cloaks thing that he just doesn't have time for. And I just recommended it be his master blacksmith and that he wound them. Because once you've killed someone, then there's a line you've already crossed that a lot of through the books, Perrin's story is, will he cross this line or not? But he does kill those White Cloaks in the first book with the Berserker Rage and things like that. So, but it lets me even accept this is the most controversial change to me, and I'm totally cool with it. I wouldn't have done it, but I can be like, you know what? In this version of the Turning of the Wheel, this is just what happened to poor Perrin. He's got a much rougher time of it.
He's just got to deal with it.
He's just got to deal with it, and I really liked how they filmed that scene. It's just compressing, right? A lot of compressing going on, and a lot of it's really good. So basically what Rafe is doing here is he's saying, okay, the bulk of the time of the Wheel of Time and a lot of people's favorite parts take place in this world building political intrigue era. That's what the Wheel of Time really is at its soul. So I'm going to accelerate some of those plots and put them in season 1 and expand some of the things that were going on behind the scenes that we know happened. We're going to show them on screen, and we're going to kind of compress a lot of that to give you that same feel so that it has a smoother transition away from quest epic or quest fantasy into political intrigue epic.
Yeah, which seems like a very good decision.
It was a great decision.
Yeah.
That's like most of his decisions I wholeheartedly support. Once I got into my head, this isn't going to be a scene by scene, then this in particular, I'm like, this is great. Like my favorite episodes of the whole season are 4, 5, and 6, I think. 6 being my favorite a bit. And his cast is really good. And Moiraine and Lan in particular are really good. Yeah. And so giving more screen time to Moiraine is not something I'll ever complain about.
Yeah. Which, just brings me back to my original point of I don't want the hardcore fans to turn their noses up at this because it has failed to pass a purity test. I want people who love these books to be able to love the series for what it is rather than hate it for what it isn't.
Yeah.
We are, kind of blinded in some ways by something like Spider-Man. How many Spider-Man reboots have we seen?
Yeah.
But most things never get that chance. Game of Thrones likely will never get another series or movies or anything.
I mean, they'll get a prequel or something like that.
And they're already working on a prequel, but the books, we're never going to get a different adaptation of those books. Once something gets adapted once, that's all you get. Like it.
People say the same thing about the Aragon film. Christopher will be like, well, it introduced the world and the books to a new audience, and that's the positive thing he'll say about it. That's not what we're saying here. We're not giving a backhanded compliment. It is legitimately a good adaptation. I would agree with you. Don't get hung up on the fact that it is not the style of adaptation that you might have wanted. I was willing to let this go. It wasn't that hard, but I did give it some thought. And at the end of it, am very glad that I did, because it lets me enjoy this thing for what it is.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous in some ways for me to even talk about all this, because the fandom is very passionate about the Wheel of Time, and very passionate about Rafe, and I don't want my criticisms of the show to turn into me saying you guys are all right, if that makes sense. I think there are legitimately some things to talk about with the show. I am not in the camp that that what Rafe has done is some tragedy and things like that. I think Rafe has done a good job. So I really enjoyed the Rand and Ishamael stuff in episode 8. Really enjoyed it. And I'll say, I feel like the other really great thing that happened was, others have disagreed, but I think that moment where you realize who the dragon was landed. Where you see from Rand's perspective
of episode 7, right?
Where you see from Rand's viewpoint that he's been using the power all along, and he's known deep down that he can channel. I think that landed, and things like this. I do not think the shows were terrible. I am glad that Rafe is in charge of this. I think they did a good job. The reason I like 6 the most is in the screenplay, it was only Moiraine's viewpoint. They said, we're going to do something different with this episode, and it's subtle in the show, but you are never seeing a shot that Moiraine isn't there in the room. We're always seeing basically through her eyes. It's a day in the life of Moiraine at the White Tower. And it's the one that ends with her getting exiled.
Yeah.
And they pull the nice little switch reversal with Swan, who's the Amerlin seat, where you think that Swan hates her, and then you realize that they're a couple, which is they were in the books, they were a couple long before. They aren't a couple when the books begin. But it's a nice sort of it's within character to put them together in this, and it plays really well.
And I've had conversations with fans of the books.
Yes.
Who are like, why do we have a whole episode about this dumb warder we've never met before?
Right.
Which I disagree with. I don't feel like at that point I really knew who anyone was, except maybe Moiraine. And so spending an episode getting to know this warder and his Aes Sedai, and then another episode watching him deal with the trauma of it, I was totally down for that, because it was this really great, consistent thing. And then the final scene where they're mourning him, I thought was incredibly powerful.
Yep.
Really enjoyed it.
I'm there with you on that. Like, this is where the series shone, where the acting chops of the actors were really on display, where it was really interesting world building, but in a subtle way. All 3 of these episodes are just great.
Yeah.
My favorite cold open is the birth on Dragonmount. Maybe my single favorite little
thing. Was that 7?
That's 8. Or no, that's 7. That's 7.
Yeah.
Right. That's 7. The birth on Dragonmount is something that we hear referenced all the time to the books. It was filmed really close to how I imagined it.
And so unique.
He was spot on from the books. He's one of my favorite. They just did an amazing job with Oil. Perfect. Wouldn't change a thing.
Wheel of Time Season 2 finale live watch and reactions. This is actually the first time we'll have all seen this. Brandon, thank you for letting us do this here.
I'm cheating, though. I've read the scripts. It's not my first time seeing it. It's my first time seeing it, but I have read it.
Okay. And well, that's going to be the fun part for all of you watching, because you'll surely get some.
The 2 Forsaken have just been so good this season.
Yeah.
You know, that's I will give them this. I do have some complaints about the adaptation.
Okay.
I think the villains are uniformly stronger than in the books. I think that being able to lend these great actors' performances to it, and leaning into how good they all are, like, it's great. I really like all the villains.
Narratively, in fact, Wheel of Time episode 8, which I felt in the scripts was the weakest, was still good, right? Still an improvement on the first season. Still a lot of great things about it.
Of course, I didn't want to talk over the clips, so my commentary is just going to be text over what he says. But, so there you go. He liked the show. He's always liked the show. He's always been able to say he hated it. He praised Rafe like there was no tomorrow. And for some of the really questionable changes, he was like, oh, I'm just cool with it. But yeah, everyone come over here and try and tell me that he secretly hated the show, and that we just gotta read between the lines, and that Sanderson is actually ultra-based, but he has to keep his power level hidden. Go ahead and tell me that again. Because it ain't true. Like, just look what he did to his own books and try and tell me he's the based book man. Just try it. You know, some of these clips, though, are going to be really perfect for reviewing the show, episode by episode. In accordance to the books, obviously. Well, that's it for this, so take it easy. See ya.